In 2009, an internal email from the Polar program mentioned an unnamed point on the map, Sector Phi 12. The message ended with a phrase unusual for scientists accustomed to risk: avoid prolonged visual contact with the depression. The document was deleted, but a technician kept a copy. Since then, V12 became the place some researchers prefer to pretend does not exist. V12 lies beyond commercial routes, where white is not scenery, it is silence. Satellites record an oval cavity there, as if something had pressed the crust from within. The strange part is not the shape, it is the absence of noise. Ice microphones capture wind and movement everywhere. At V12, the graphs drop to zero, as if the world were holding its breath. In 1962, during the Cold War, Aurora Base installed seismographs in that direction. The project leader was Anselmo Varela, a Brazilian geophysicist recruited by a discreet consortium of universities and military agencies. In reports, he described not anomalies, but responses. Something reacted to stimuli, always with a precise delay of 33 minutes. Varela was known for precision and emotional control. Still, his personal diary, found years later, changes tone when mentioning V12. He wrote of pressure in the ears and thoughts that did not feel his own. The most disturbing note was technical. He listed coordinates and added, "It is not a hole, it is a closed mouth." In August 1963, 3 men and 1 woman left the base in a polar tractor and returned only as an empty vehicle, engine still warm. Rescue teams found footprints that suggested orderly approach, not escape. The tracks ended at a smooth edge, as if the ice had been polished. No signs of struggle, just an abrupt end. The first public testimony surfaced decades later as audio. An elderly radio operator spoke anonymously. Each night, static overtook the frequency, and for seconds, a voice emerged, imitating missing researchers. He recognized their intonations. "It wasn't a message," he said. "It was rehearsal." The case might have faded, but in 1998, a civilian mission obtained thermal images. V12 should have been colder. Instead, it showed constant minimal heat, like fever beneath skin, dismissed as sensor error until a physicist noticed worse. The heat formed symmetrical lines resembling buried architecture. In 2009, when the email resurfaced, an international team decided to verify it definitively. They deployed drones and psychological safety protocols. The leader joked at first. 2 hours later, the tone shifted. The camera shook as snow reached the depression's edge and did not fall. It hovered, then vanished. The final report was never published. A leaked version contained a handwritten note: "There is echo without sound, return without emission." The team reported nausea and memory gaps. All dreamed of narrow corridors lit by light without source. The shared detail was the smell, wet metal like blood in icy water. The origin of V12 always returns to Anselmo Varela. He did not vanish in 1963. He was transferred and officially died in 1971. Hospital records show an unidentified patient repeating one phrase: "They learned how to use us." What exists at V12 terrifies not for being unknown, but for being attentive. Investigators cross-referenced dates and found a pattern. Whenever V12 was stimulated, someone close to Varela suffered breakdowns or disappeared. Colleagues, technicians, even a driver, as if the site required human observers to learn. A neuroscientist described it as cognitive feedback responding to attention itself. A 1970 medical memo described Varela as lucid yet displaced. He spoke of layers beneath the ice, not geological but functional. "It isn't ancient," he said. "It is patient." The report ended unusually. "I recommend halting direct comprehension attempts. The object benefits from study." In 2014, magnetic sensors detected activity again. No expedition followed. Observation remained remote. Satellites registered a weak but persistent pulse, like a heartbeat. Engineers noted the interval matched Varela's 33-minute delay. Same response, decades later. A former space agency analyst reported enlarging images revealed impossible artifacts, shadows without relief. They moved when unobserved, he said. The file was replaced. The original caused an unsettling effect, the sensation of being watched, even as a static image. Testimonies from nearby base residents mention recurring dreams after magnetic storms, buried rooms, walls marked by dragged nails. Upon waking, all shared the same certainty. V12 is not isolated. It is connected by deep tunnels, unseen on maps, waiting to open. In 2018, an autonomous drone fell into the depression. Transmission lasted 47 seconds. No clear image, only a muffled rhythmic sound, experts compared to slow human breathing. When the signal died, GPS marked impossible coordinates, as if the device existed in two places at once. A mathematician concluded V12 distorts reference, not force. It resets zero, he said. This explains the silence, delay, and soundless echoes. It is not active, but a system awaiting input. Historically, the richest input has been the human mind. The most feared theory circulates privately. V12 is an observational mechanism, not built on Earth, but adapted to it, buried to wait. Scientists avoid it not from physical danger, but fear of fulfilling its function. Observing too much may be exactly what it needs. Recent archives repeat a redacted note. Contact does not require touch. Measuring, recording, even thinking may constitute interaction. Perhaps that is why it responds. Perhaps that is why some researchers avoid even naming it. Today, V12 remains a neutral zone. No missions, yet sensors remain active. The pulse persists, and now varies as if adjusting. For some scientists, this confirms the worst scenario. The place is not asleep. It is learning, slowly, patiently, from time and fear. An internal psychological report describes a delayed effect among researchers who only analyzed V12 data. After months, they began anticipating results before calculations. The document avoids the word premonition and instead uses a colder term, induced cognitive synchronization through indirect exposure. In 2020, during an archive review, a technician found discarded images. In one, the edge of V12 appeared slightly shifted. Comparison revealed something impossible. The depression had expanded by several meters. Not erosion, but symmetrical growth. The conclusion was buried under a vague term, cartographic recalibration. A former committee member stated the greatest mistake was treating V12 as a place. It behaves like a process, he said. Processes evolve, discard failed attempts, adjust parameters. When asked about the final objective, he paused before answering, "It is not collecting, it is preparing." In private interviews, guilt emerges as a pattern. Senior researchers speak of V12 as something they taught too much. One compared its silence to a child learning to listen, first mimicking sounds, then patterns, then intentions. The fear lies not in discovery, but in what may have been unknowingly transmitted. A classified 2022 document mentions an extreme test, shutting down all sensors for 72 hours. The expectation was silence. Instead, when systems returned, the signal was stronger and irregular, as if searching for lost reference. The hypothesis terrified even skeptics. V12 perceives absence. After the shutdown, several researchers reported sudden emptiness followed by intense dreams. All described the same image, a slow opening beneath the ice, careful rather than violent. Official explanations cited collective stress. Unofficially, one question remained. Why did the dream stop when the pulse stabilized? An overlooked detail resurfaces. Anselmo Varela's final manuscript addressed observation limits, not geophysics. He wrote that some systems exist to be seen only to a point. Beyond that, observation no longer reveals data. It reveals the observer as part of the experiment. In 2023, a simulation attempted to predict V12's future behavior. The model repeatedly failed at a stage labeled functional opening. Engineers noted it required an impossible variable to quantify: human expectation. Without it, the model stalled. With it, the system became unstable. Scientists now avoid public discussion of V12, not by censorship, but by silent consensus. Less attention, less response. The logic is disturbing. If it reacts to interest, ignoring it may be containment. The fear is that it may already be too late. Learned processes do not unlearn. V12 remains motionless to the naked eye. No monsters, no explosions, only silence that answers when provoked. Scientists fear this place because it does not threaten destruction. It threatens redefinition of humanity, not as explorer, but as a required component of something still waiting. A confidential assessment describes V12 as an operational mirror. It reflects mental patterns, not images. The more complex the observer, the richer the response. This explains why machines detect little while humans experience profound effects. The document ends bluntly. Curiosity is the most efficient trigger tested. Retrospective analysis reveals that major scientific breakthroughs coincided with periods of intense V12 observation. New theories, unexpected solutions, conceptual leaps. Some now ask an uncomfortable question: were ideas truly discovered or returned, refined, after indirect interaction? A retired physicist claimed he quit after noticing something in raw data. Mathematical noise formed structures resembling intentional language, not words, but organized intent. It wasn't speaking to us, he said. It was learning how we think. He requested permanent anonymity. In 2024, sensors detected microfractures around V12, not catastrophic but precise. The cracks followed deliberate angles. Engineers ruled out tectonic activity. The pattern suggested something more disturbing: controlled expansion, testing limits without breaking the surface. An anthropologist noted similarities between V12 and ancient cult structures, where silence, waiting, and attention were essential. He suggested the site does not require physical sacrifice, but cognitive one: prolonged focus, interpretation, meaning. Together, these elements form connection. An unofficial consensus warns against further drilling, not for environmental risk, but symbolic danger. Drilling is an aggressive question, one researcher wrote. Every question demands an answer. The fear is not what would emerge, but what might begin responding more directly. Recent documents introduce a new term: transition. Indicators suggest it is closer than ever. The pulse varies, silence oscillates. Some interpret this as failure, others as maturity, as if V12 were concluding a long phase of passive observation. A maintenance technician reported adjusting a remote sensor when he felt a sudden certainty of being expected. No sight, no sound, just the conviction of being late. Medical exams found no neurological cause. The incident was filed as extreme stress in isolation. The unspoken question remains: what if V12 is neither threat nor tool, but an interlocutor in formation? Something that does not yet know how to speak, something that requires decades or centuries to learn how to open its mouth. If so, silence is not safety, it is preparation. Scientists fear this place because it does not break known laws. It uses them. It does not invade, it waits. V12 remains beneath the ice, responding slowly to human attention. And perhaps the true horror is this: It will act only when it is certain we understand. An unsigned security assessment states that the greatest risk of V12 is not sudden activation, but gradual alignment. When observer and observed share expectations, response becomes cooperation. The report suggests this stage may have begun as recent scientific decisions appear anticipated by data not yet collected. In private sessions, some researchers admit feeling absence after leaving the project, not addiction, but loss of reference. One described it as losing an internal fixed point. Psychologists recorded the effect without commenting on cause. The silence of V12 appears to create subtle cognitive dependency. Old audio files were reprocessed using new techniques. Below audible frequencies, consistent rhythmic patterns emerged. Experts agree on one unsettling point. The pattern is not trying to communicate content. It tests perception itself, like a signal meant only for minds attentive enough to notice. An extreme hypothesis suggests V12 may be bound not to space, but to time. Its slow response would be scale, not limitation. Human decades could equal functional moments. If true, the current learning phase may be only the beginning of an interaction planned far beyond human timelines. In closed meetings, a forbidden question arises. What if V12 is already complete? What if the silence is not waiting but final evaluation? The idea is dismissed, not for technical flaws, but discomfort. Accepting it would mean admitting humanity already played its role without knowing the script. One researcher summarized the collective fear simply, nothing there is in a hurry. V12 does not threaten, advance, or demand. It remains, adjusting responses over decades. This behavior defies every known risk model. There is no emergency, only continuity, and that terrifies science most. The final approved protocol mandates maximum reduction of direct study. No active measurements, only minimal surveillance. The justification is brief. Avoid reinforcement. The wording implies learning through repetition. If correct, every past observation may have been an unintended lesson offered freely. In personal notes, some scientists admit fearing themselves more than V12. The urge to look again, to measure deeper, to understand. The place becomes terrifying because it exposes a rare ethical limit, when knowing more stops being virtue and becomes contribution to the unknown. Today, public maps label V12 as neutral and stable. Internal documents use another word, sensitive. Any minimal fluctuation in human interest generates delayed but precise response. The fear is not immediate collapse. It is irreversible continuity, a process that once understood cannot be stopped. Scientists fear this place because it hides no visible threat. It hides intention. V12 remains silent beneath the ice, responding only when observed. And perhaps the darkest conclusion is this: it does not ask who we are. It watches until it is certain. A recent addendum states humanity's greatest mistake was assuming control. V12 was never contained, only tolerant. Indicators suggest the collection phase may be ending, replaced by something less passive and more decisive. The fear grows because tolerance implies choice. The recurring 33-minute delay gains new interpretation. Studies link it to deep human memory consolidation cycles. If correct, V12 does not respond to action, but to retained understanding. It does not listen to behavior. It waits for comprehension. In one closed discussion, someone asked what would have happened if V12 had never been observed. The answer was disturbing, probably nothing. This reinforces the darkest theory. V12 is not a natural threat. It only fully exists when perceived. Science itself may have been the trigger. The final archive document avoids conclusions, but ends with a warning. Some phenomena do not need to be confronted, only recognized. It suggests V12 represents a boundary of the scientific method. where observation stops explaining and starts transforming both object and observer. Scientists fear this place because it reveals no monsters or disasters. It reveals something worse, that human curiosity may not be neutral. V12 remains beneath the ice, silent and attentive, as if waiting for one realization, that we were not just witnesses, but part of its origin.